Alright, we are live. Today we're playing a bit more Morrowind. And we're gonna keep finding and reading all the books. Make sure everything is set up real quick. Alright, should be all set. Nice. Just gotta do game audio now, and then go on. Here we go. Good to go. Alright. I might want to turn the game audio up a little bit, though. I like having a little bit of the music come through while I'm reading. Seems, Morrowind's got some nice relaxing music. Alright, so let's go to this save.
We're watching you, scum.
Okay, man. Now, let's see. What to read next? This is tough. Legion of the Dead. I don't think I've read that one. Right? Let's see. But yeah, I'm excited to get back to it. Alright, so it should be an instruction and research. So let's check if I have it.
Watch yourself.
I don't think I have
We'll
it.
have no trouble here.
Gotta find it first. Oh my goodness. There we go. Okay. Legions of the Dead, I have not read yet. Nice. So I guess we can hop straight away into another book.
Keep moving.
Now, this is actually something, pretty nice as well. Since for the other series I had started doing some modding, the text is a lot more sharp because I got a HD font installed. So the words aren't, they used to be a bit more blurry, so that's nice. And this is supposed to just be an HD version of the original font, so it should be the same, but I could also try different fonts out, see if there's one I like more, but I think I'll just stick with this one because it's pretty good. It's just a HD version of the very original. Alright. Legions of the Dead. Undead commonly occur in three basic types: spirit, flesh, and fleshless. Spirit revenants, like the Ancestor Ghost, Wraith, and Dwarven Ghost, can only be harmed by weapons that are enchanted or made of refined substances such as silver. Ancestor Ghosts, the most common spirit revenant, are harmless, apart from the minor curses they lay upon their victims. Wraiths are similar to ghosts, but they're capable of inflicting wounds to the careless explorer. Dwarven Ghosts are more dangerous still, but they generally only appear in dwarven ruins. Flesh revenants, or zombies as they're often called in the West, are known as bone walkers in Morrowind. Magic preserves the bone walkers' fleshy remains along with the bones and spirit. Bone walkers are readily identifiable by the sharp protuberances of bone and metal employed in the rituals that bind them to this plane. All bone walkers are malevolent and dangerous, but the greater bone walkers are far worse than the more common lesser bone walkers. Thankfully, normal weapons harm bone walkers. It is difficult to generalize about fleshless revenants, or skeletons. The agility and fighting ability of the animated remains may depend on the abilities of the revenant's former life, and may therefore be weak or strong, or more or less capable with weapons and shields. Fortunately, enchanted weapons are not needed to destroy skeletons. An exception is the Bone Lord, a peculiar form of revenant that seems to derive its powers more from its spirit energies than from the substance of its skeletal remains. Bone Lords are very powerful and very dangerous. Normal weapons do not affect them. Vampires were believed to be extinct in Morrowind for centuries. Dummer culture has a special hatred for vampires, and in earlier times, the Ordinators and Buoyant Armigers hunted them to extinction. In recent years, however, vampires have either begun to sneak into Morrowind, or long dormant ones have been awakened. Vampires vary in their substance and power according to their age and accumulated lore, but even the weakest vampire is immeasurably stronger than most other undead. Note, ash vampires are not vampires, and are not undead. Ash vampires are extremely dangerous. While their spirit and substance may indeed be preserved by some magical process, the holy warriors of the Tribunal Temple report that spell effects known to affect the undead have no effect on the ash vampires. Yeah. I mean, I guess, that's also an interesting thing about the lore, I guess. They're taking it from, the common people. They see someone that looks like a vampire, call it a vampire. It happens in real life a lot as well. But, yeah, I mean, I pretty much knew all this, but it's it's a nice little book. Honestly, I know so much, I know a lot, I've, learned so much about Elder Scrolls lore already that I'm more, pretty surprised if a book has stuff I don't know about or haven't heard of at all. I'm kind of expecting most of them to, reiterate stuff that I already know. But also, when you're reading stuff, rather than watching, like, a video about it, to me at least, when I, actually read it, it sticks in the head better. So, if someone asks me, hey, what are, blah, blah, what is a Bone Lord? I might have had a bit more trouble remembering what that is if I just watched a YouTube video where they mentioned it, whereas reading a book where they mentioned it. But, alright. One book down. That was a pretty short one. It was nice, though. Just kind of informative. Let's see. Mysterious Activator, Liza Saints, House of Troubles. I don't know if... I think I have read this one. That should be a faction book, probably. I'm pretty sure I have read it. Oh, it's not a faction book. Okay. Let's see. Come on. It's in Religion and Prophecy. Right. Because House of Troubles is, kind of thought to be not a faction that exists anymore, I suppose. Life Saints. Okay. That one does have a check next to it, so definitely did read that already. Yes, I have read House of Troubles. Alright. Annotated Annuad, definitely read that. Arcturian Heresy. That sounds familiar, so I believe I've read it.
If you're here for trouble, you'll get more than you bargained for.
Doors of the Spirit. I'm trying to think. I'm not sure. I'm sort of getting to the point where I've read a lot of the books. Yellow Book of Riddles. I don't think I've read that one. I've read a lot of books, so it's hard to think off the top of my head whether I've read one or not. So that's in Plays Poetry and Riddles. I don't think I've read this. I'm pretty shit at riddles as well, though, so If I read this, I'm probably not going to remember any of them. Or, know how to solve any of them.
Let's not make this official, Outlander. Move along.
Yeah, I'm just reading in the library. Yellow Book of Riddles here. Nope, I have not read this one yet. Words of Clan. I don't think I've read that one either.
Watching you,
Okay.
scum.
But for now, let's go Yellow Book of Riddles. Alright. I wonder if the answers are in here as well. Hopefully. Or else I just won't know the answer at all. Alright. Let's take another sip. The Yellow Book of Riddles. For earnest pleasure, the strengthening of the mind, the author here collects all that he has learned of the art of riddling, by dint of diligent study and through years of discourse with others of similar inclination. The posing and puzzling of riddles is a convention of light aristocratic Western society. Nobles and social aspirants collect books of riddles and study them, hoping thereby to increase the chances of their appearing sly and witty in conversation. A metal neither black nor red, as heavy as man's golden greed, what you do to stay ahead with friend or arrow or steed. Oh, okay, no, the answer is here. The answer, lead. It's just backwards. So yeah, it's a metal, not black or red. Has as heavy as gold, and lead, you're staying ahead. Okay. That's a good one. A man says, if you lie to me, I will slay you with my sword. If you tell me the truth, I will slay you with a spell. What must you say to stay alive? Not the truth and not a lie. Something you don't know? No, I mean, that doesn't make any sense. You just don't say anything. I don't know. The answer, you will slay me with a sword. Oh, because then if he does slay you with a sword, then it is the truth. You put him in a little conundrum. Alright, next one. A Bosmer was slain. The Altmer claims the Dunmer is guilty. The Dunmer says the Khajiit did it. The Orc swears he didn't kill the Bosmer. The Khajiit says the Dunmer is lying. If only one of these speaks the truth, who killed the Bosmer? Dang. Sadly, I already read the answer. It was kind of an accident. It was too easy to read this. So it's York. Dang it. I kind of wish I hadn't accidentally read that. Okay. Well, those are some fun riddles. Maybe you can try them out in real life as well. I mean, I don't know if the last one would really work, but, you know, you could adapt them for the real world. I don't know when you'd ever need to give a riddle, but there's a couple that work. Chairman, wait, didn't I read this last time? I don't think I marked it. This was the one that I didn't mark down, wasn't it?
We're watching you.
Chairman's Heart of Anakina. It might have been. I'm gonna go ahead and check if I marked it down, and then we're just gonna, like, open it up and see. Alright, there it is. Okay. Yep. Oh, there we go.
We're watching you. Scum.
Yes, so this is one I read last time, but I didn't find it in the notebook, so I hadn't marked it down. There we go. Alright. What is next? Words of Clanmother Anisi. I do not know if I've read that one yet. Clan Mother is in Religion and Prophecy. I have not read it. Alright, let's see what Clan Mother Anisi has to say. Words of Clan Mother Anisi to her favorite daughter. Anisi tells you, you are no longer a mewing kitten, and you have learned to keep secrets from Anisi, and so Anisi tells you. In the beginning, there were two littermates, Anur and Fatimai. After many phases, Fatimai said to Anur, "Let us wed and make children to share our happiness." And they gave birth to Alkosh, the first cat, and Anur said, "Alkosh, we give you time for what is as fast or as slow as a cat." And they gave birth to Kinnereth, the winds. "Kinnereth, to you we give the sky, for what can fly higher than the wind?" And they gave birth to Magris, the cat's eye. "Magris, to you we give the sun, for what is brighter than the eye of a cat?" And they gave birth to Mara, the mother cat. "Mara, you are love, for what is more loving than a mother?" And they gave birth to Srendar, the runt. "Srendar, we give you mercy, for how does a runt survive except by mercy?" And many phases passed, and Anur and Fatimai were happy. And Anur said, "We should have more children to share our happiness." And Fatimai agreed, and she gave birth to Hermora, and she gave birth to Hircine, and she gave birth to Maruns, and Mafala, and Sangin, and Shigorath, and many others. And Fatimai said, "Hermora, you are the tides, for who can say whether the moons predict the tides or the tides predict the moons?" "Hircine, you are the hungry cat, for what hunts better than a cat with an empty belly?" "Maroons, you are the Jakajit, for what is more destructive than a kitten?" "Mafala, you are the clan mother, for what is more secretive than the ways of the clan mothers?" "Sangin, you are the blood cat, for who can control the urges of blood?" "Shigorath, you are the skooma cat, for what is crazier than a cat on skooma?" And Anur said, "2 litters is enough, for too many children will steal our happiness." But Kinnereth went to Fatimai and said, "Fatimai, mother, Kinarthi grows lonely so high above the world where not even my brother Alkosh can fly." Fatimai took pity on her and tricked Anur to make her pregnant again. And Fatimai gave birth to the moons and their motions, and she gave birth to Nerni, the majestic sands and lush forests. And she gave birth to Azura, the dusk and the dawn. And from the beginning, Nerni and Azura fought for their mother's favor. Anur caught Fatimai while she was still birthing, and he was angry. Anur struck Fatimai, and she fled to birth the last of her litter far away in the great darkness. Fatimai's children heard what had happened, and they all came to be with her and to protect her from Anur's anger. And Fatimai gave birth to Lorkaj, the last of her litter, in the great darkness, and the heart of Lorkaj was with the great darkness. And when he was born, the great darkness knew its name, and it was Namira. And Fatimai knew her time was near. Fatimai said, "Jakajay, to you Fatimai gives the lattice, for what is steadier than the phases of the moon? Your eternal motions will protect us from Anur's anger." And the moons left to take their place in the heavens, and Anur growled and shook the great darkness, but he could not cross the lattice. And Fatimai said, "Nerni, to you Fatimai leaves her greatest gift. You will give birth to many people, as Fatimai gave birth today." When Nerni saw that Azura had nothing, Nerni left smiling. And all Fatimai's children left, except Azura, and Fatimai said, "To you, my favored daughter, Fatimai leaves her greatest gift. To you, Fatimai leaves her secrets." And Fatimai told her favored daughter 3 things. And Fatimai said, When Nirni is filled with her children, take one of them and change them. Make the fastest, cleverest, and most beautiful people, and call them Khajiit. And Faramai said, the Khajiit must be the best climbers, for if Maser and Secunda fail, they must climb Kinnereth's breath to set the moons back in their course. And Faramai said, the Khajiit must be the best deceivers, for they always must hide their nature from the children of Anur. And Faramai said, the Khajiit must be the best survivors, for Nirni will be jealous, and she will make the sands harsh and the forests unforgiving. And the Khajiit will always be hungry and at war with Nirni. And with these words, Faramai died. After many phases, Nirni came to Lorkhaj and said, Lorkhaj, Faramai told me to give birth to many children, but there's no place for them. And Lorkhaj said, Lorkhaj makes a place for children, and Lorkhaj puts you there so you can give birth. But the heart of Lorkhaj was filled with the great darkness, and Lorkhaj tricked his siblings so that they were forced into this new place with Nirni. And many of Faramai's children escaped and became the stars, and many of Faramai's children died to make Nirni's path stable. And the survivors stayed and punished Lorkhaj. The children of Faramai tore out the heart of Lorkhaj and hid it deep within Nirni, and they said, we curse you, noisy Lorkhaj, to walk Nirni for many phases. But Nirni soon forgave Lorkhaj, for Nirni could make children, and she filled herself with children, but cried because her favorite children, the forest people, did not know their shape. And Azura came to her and said, poor Nirni, stop your tears. Azura makes for you a gift of a new people. Nirni stopped, weeping, and Azura spoke the first secret to the moons, and they parted, and let Azura pass. And Azura took some forest people who were torn between man and beast, and she placed them in the best deserts and forests on Nirni. And Azura, in her wisdom, made them of many shapes, one for every purpose. And Azura named them Khajiit, and told them her second secret, and taught them the value of secrets. And Azura bound the new Khajiit to the lunar lattice, as is proper for Nirni's secret defenders. Then Azura spoke the third secret, and the moon shone down on the marshes, and their light became sugar. But Ymir heard the first secret and snuck in behind Azura, and Ymir could not appreciate secrets, and he told Nirni of Azura's trick. So Nirni made the deserts hot and the sands biting, and Nirni made the forests wet and filled with poisons. And Nirni thanked Ymir and let him change the forest people also. And Ymir did not have Azura's subtle wisdom. So Ymir made the forest people elves, always and forever, and always and never beasts. And Ymir named them Bosmer, and from that moment they were no longer in the same litter as the Khajiit. And because Ymir had no appreciation for secrets, he shouted the first secret all across the heavens with his last breath, so that all Faramai's children could cross the lattice. But Azura, in her wisdom, closed the ears of angry Anur and the noisy Lorkhaj, so they alone did not hear the word. Alright. Hello, Azrinth the alien. You're King A, cool. Hello, Carson. When am I gonna beat Majora's Mask? I don't know. Probably won't, because I deleted the save file, but it seems like you're also left the stream anyway. Reading sim. Read what I said about Need for Speed on Discord. Okay. But also, you don't need to complain every single time that I do this. I enjoy it. Quite a few other people enjoy it as well. And, I mean, it seems like you're also not here, though. Read chats. Reading the books first. That's what I enjoy about these streams. Alright.
We're watching.
Okay. Let's mark that one off. Move on to the next one. If I can find any here that I haven't read yet. I've read quite a few. The changed ones I think I've read. Or maybe not. I don't know. I've seen it before, but maybe I just assumed that I had read it and hadn't yet. No, I've read it. Cantatas of Vivek, I've read that. Brief History, I've read. Progress of Truth, I'm pretty sure I've read. Yellow Book, Brief History, read those. Grasping Fortune, that one I'm not sure about. It's in faction books, so actually probably it's the Thieves Guild one, isn't it?
Watch yourself. We'll have no trouble here.
Yeah, I've read that. Arcturian Heresy. Let's check if I've read that. It's in History and Lore. But yeah, I'm making some good progress. I mean, there's quite a few books I haven't read, of course, but I've read quite a few at this point.
Let's not make this official.
It's pretty good.
Move along.
Alright, History and Lore. Definitely should have written them down a different way. Arcturian Heresy, actually haven't read that. I thought I had. I've seen it like quite a few times already, but I guess I just never ended up actually reading it, which is interesting. Alright. The Arcturian Heresy. The Underking Ysmir Kingmaker. With his god destroyed, Wulfharth finds it hard to keep his form. He staggers out of Red Mountain to the battlefield beyond. The world has shaken, and all of Morrowind is made of fire. A strong gale picks up and blows his ashes back to Skyrim. Wulfharth adopts and is adopted by the Nords then. Ysmir the Grey Wind, the Storm of Kine. But through Lorkhan, he lost his national identity. All he wants, the Nords, for is to kill the Tribunal. He raises a storm and sends his people, and is driven back by Tribunal forces. The Dunmer are too strong now. Wulfharth goes underground to wait and strengthen and reform his body anew. Oddly enough, it is Almalexia who disturbs his rest, summoning the Underking to fight alongside the Tribunal against Adasum Dir Kamal, the Akviri demon. Wulfharth disappears after Adasum is defeated, and does not return for 300 years. It is the rumbling of the Greybeards that wake him. Though the Empire has crumbled, there are rumors that a Chosen will come to restore it. This new Emperor will defeat the Elves and rule a united Tamriel. Naturally, Wulfharth thinks he is the figure of prophecy. He goes directly to High Hrothgar to hear the Greybeards speak. When they do, Ysmir's blasted to ash again. He is not the Chosen One. It is a warrior youth from High Rock. As the Grey Wind goes to find this boy, he hears the Greybeard's warning. Remember the color of betrayal, King Wulfharth. The Western Reach was at war. Kuala Khan, the king of Falkreath in West Cyrodiil, was in a bad situation. To make any bid at unifying the Colovian estates, he needed to secure his northern border, where the Nords and Reachmen had been fighting for centuries. He allies with Skyrim at the Battle of Old Hroldan. Leading his forces was Hjalti Earlybeard. Hjalti was from the island kingdom of Alcair in High Rock and would become Tiber Septim, the first emperor of Tamriel. Hjalti was a shrewd tactician, and his small band of Colovian troops and Nord berserkers broke the Reachman line, forcing them back beyond the gates of Old Hroldan. A siege seemed impossible, as Hjalti could expect no reinforcements from Falkreath. That night, a storm came and visited Hjalti's camp. It spoke with him in his tent. At dawn, Hjalti went up to the gates, and the storm followed just above his head. Arrows could not penetrate the winds around him. He shouted down the walls of Old Hroldan, and his men poured in. After their victory, the Nords called Hjalti Talos, or Storm Crown. Kublai Khan, with his new invincible general, unifies West Cyrodiil in under a year. No one can stand before Hjalti's storms. The Underking knows that if Hjalti is to become the Emperor of Tamriel, he must first capture the Eastern Heartland. Hjalti uses them both. He needs Kublai Khan in the Clolovina states where foreigners are most trusted. It is obvious why he needs Ysmir. They march on the east. The battle mages surrender before their armies, and they take the citadel. Before Kublai Khan can be crowned, Hjalti secretly murders him and his loyalist contingent. These assassinations are blamed on the enemies of Kublai Khan, which for political reasons are still the Western Reach. Zurin Arctis, the Grand Battle Mage, not the Underking, then crowns Hjalti as Tiber Septim, new emperor of all Cyrodiil. After he captures the imperial throne, Septim finds the initial administration of a fully united Cyrodiil a time-consuming task. He sends the Underking to deal with imperial expansion into Skyrim and High Rock. Ysmir, mindful that it might seem as if Tiber Septim is in two places at once, works behind the scenes. This period of level-headed statesmanship and diplomacy, this sudden silence, and heretofore unknown in the roaring tales of Talosian conquest are explained away later. The assassination story is embroidered. Now, it is properly Talos' own throat that was cut. The human kingdoms are conquered, even Hammerfell, whose capture was figured to be an arduous task. The Underking wants a complete invasion, a chance to battle their foreign wind spirits himself. But Tiber Septim refutes him. He has already made a better plan, one that will not seem to legitimize his rule. Cyrodiil supports the losing side of a civil war and are invited in. Finally, the Empire can turn its eyes onto the elves. The Underking continues to press on Tiber Septim, the need to conquer Morrowind. The Emperor is not sure that it is a wise idea. He has heard of the Tribunal's power. The Underking wants his vengeance, and reminds Tiber Septim that he is fated to conquer the elves, even the Tribunal. Arctis advises against the move, but Septim covets the ebony in Morrowind, as he sorely needs a source of capital to rebuild Cyrodiil after 400 years of war. The Underking tells him that with the Tribunal dead, Septim might steal the Tribunal's power and use it against the High Elves, certainly the oldest enemies of Lorkhan, predating even the Tribunal. Somerset Isle is the farthest thing from Tiber Septim's mind. Even then, he was planning to send Zurin Arctis to the King of Alinor to make peace. The Ebony needs win out in the end. The Empire invades Morrowind, and the Tribunal give up when certain conditions of the armistices include not only a policy of non-interference with the Tribunal, but also, in the Underking's eyes, a validation of their religious beliefs. Ysmir is furious. He abandons the Empire completely. This was the betrayal the Greybeard spoke of, or so he thinks. Without the Underking's power, all ideas of conquering Tamriel vanish. Would have been nice, Septim thinks, but let's just worry about Cyrodiil and the human nations already there. Already there's a rebellion in Hammerfell. Pieces of the Numidium trickle in though. Tiber Septim, always fascinated by the dwarves, has Zurin Arctis research this grand artifact. In doing so, Arctis stumbles upon some of the stories of the war at Red Mountain. He discovers the reason the Numidium was made, and some of its potential. Most importantly, he learns the Underking's place in the war. But Zurin Arctis was working from incomplete plans. He thinks it is the heart of Lorkhan's body that is needed to power the Numidium. While Zurin Arctis is raving about his discovery, the prophecy finally becomes clear to Tiber Septim. This Numidium is what he needs to conquer the world. It is his destiny to have it. He contacts the Underking and says he was right all along. They should kill the Tribunal, and they need to get together and make a plan. While the Underking was away, he realized the true danger of Dagoth-Ur. Something must be done, but he needs an army, and his old one is available again. The trap is set. The Underking arrives and is ambushed by Imperial guards. As he takes them on, Zurin Arctus uses a soul gem on him. With his last breath, the Underking's heart roars a hole through the battle mage's chest. In the end, everyone is dead. The Underking has reverted back to ash, and Tiber Septim strolls in to take the soul gem. When the Elder Council arrives, he tells them about the second attempt on his life, and this time by his trusted battle mage, Zurin Arctus, who is attempting a coup. He has the dead guards celebrated as heroes, even the one who is blasted to ash. He warns Cyrodiil about the dangers within, but says he has a solution to the dangers without the Mantella. The Numidium, while not the god Tiber Septim and the Dwemer hoped for, the Underking was not exactly Lorkhan after all. It does the job. After its work on Somerset Isles, a new threat appears. A rotting, undead wizard who controls the skies. He blows the Numidium apart, but it pounds him into the ground with its last flailings, leaving only a black splosh. The Mantella falls into the sea, seemingly forever. Meanwhile, Tiber Septim crowns himself the first emperor of Tamriel. He lives until he is 108, the richest man in history. All aspects of his early reign are rewritten. Still, there are conflicting reports of what really happened, and this is why there's such confusion over such questions as, why does Alcair claim to be the birthplace of Talos, while other sources say he came from Atmora? Why does Tiber Septim seem to be a different person after his first roaring conquest? Why does Tiber Septim betray his battle mage? Is the Mantella the heart of the battle mage, or is it the heart of Tiber Septim? Tiber Septim is succeeded by his grandson, Pelagius I. Pelagius is just not the same caliber. In truth, he's a little nervous with all these provinces. Then an advisor shows up. "I was friends with your grandfather," the Underking says. "He sent me to help you run the Empire." Honestly, I don't really know enough about the Underking. I think that's probably something I could do to learn a bit more about. And it seems pretty interesting. Like, I knew about his story with Tiber Septim. I knew some of it, at least. I didn't really know about him wanting revenge on the tribunal, I guess. I might have heard about that, but I definitely forgot it by now. Or I had forgotten it by now. But, yeah. This was a good read. It was a very, very nice book. Liked it a lot. And it was pretty interesting as well. Alright, so go ahead and mark that off. Alright, anything else here? Doors of Spirit. It's gotta be a religious one. I think I read it. I think I have. I have. Okay. Let's see if there is anything else here. We might have to go try to find a new source of books. Because I'm starting to see the same books. Oh, yeah. Whoa. Yes. Can I even read this? An obscure text in the language of the Slowed, purportedly written by the Second Era Western necromancer Ngasta. Yeah, I don't think I can read this. I can mark it off, but I don't think I can read this. I don't even know what category this would be in. Ngasta, Kvata, Kvakis, Axtas, So, Nova, Shelturo. Yeah, I cannot read that. No shot. Let's see. Gasta is in esoteric texts. It is quite esoteric. I mean, how are you supposed to read slowed? There's probably a translation for this as well, though. Could maybe find it. You know what? I am gonna look it up. Let's see, if I go here... Translation can be found here. Okay. So there's a bit of lore around it, I suppose. The book that seems to be among the possessions of most necromancers in Morrowind has always been mysterious. In fact, even after translating, the book is confusing. The original text is actually a slightly altered version of the Esperanto language. The decoded text actually has nothing to do with Morrowind. Oh, okay. Let's see what this is. So, it says, Kvak Kvak is the newsletter of the La Renotage. It is sent to paying members and other individuals who, in some way, are involved in the La Renotage's activities. In it, there firstly is information about the locations of monthly meetings, but, of course, also concerning the latest activities of the club. Sometimes it also includes other educating or entertaining materials. The internet-based Kvako are, on the one hand, other distribution channels for contents of the paper version, but on the other hand, not surprisingly, the contents of different versions cannot, and even must not, always be 100% the same. For instance, in little circulating paper versions, you can publish illustrations that for copyright reasons cannot be used on the internet. Yet on the other hand, the low costs of the internet version lift the space limits and allow more content, not to mention being always up to date. These circumstances influence the web-based Kvako, which will also serve as the general homepage of the La Renotage. What? What? What does that mean? What is that about? So this person wrote in the Imperial Library. Some time ago, they stumbled across Ngasta Kvata Kwaku's book and game. Having studied some Esperanto, he recognized the similarities. As the library provided much information on it besides the text, I tried to encode it myself. Oh, this is the guy who encoded figure out what it said. This was posted in 2003. Dang. Okay. Fortunately, the text is not related to Morrowind at all. It's an obfuscated version of the text in Esperanto picked from the internet. The original text can be found there. It covers Kvak Kvak, which is the newsletter of La Renotage, the Small Frogs, the Stockholm Esperanto Society. The translation may not be very accurate because you only possess basic knowledge of Esperanto. Wow. Okay, that is very interesting. I wonder why they chose this randomly. Okay. That's interesting. Alright. Well, I guess that is a book that exists for some reason. A Dance in Fire. I've heard this book is really good. And it's the whole series. Nice. I'm excited about this one. I've heard good things. I think it's the whole thing. Let me check. Let's see. Fiction. I'm pretty sure it's a fiction book. Dance and Fire, chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Nice. Seems like I've already read chapter 1, apparently. But, oh, it's by Wogan Jarth. Of course it's a good book. I might just read it all the way through. Why not? Alright. A Dance in Fire, Chapter 1, by Wogan Jarth. Scene, the Imperial City, Cyrodiil, Date 7, Frostfall, 3rd Era, 397. It seemed as if the palace had always housed the Atreus Building Commission. Oh yeah, I have read. Okay, well, I'll just keep reading it, but I have read this. The company of clerks and estate agents who authored and notarized nearly every actually, how long is it? I have read the first chapter. I remember it. You know, I'm thinking about doing, like, going back, reading the books, again, not on stream, but, you know, recording basically audiobooks and then posting that on my channel as well as, like, a video, making a playlist. But, you know, I find it fun to, like, find the book in-game first as well. So, when I get around to doing that and have the time to do that, I will, you know. So if that sounds like something interesting, look forward to that. Coming at some point. I don't know when. Don't have a lot of time, honestly, to do that. But for now, since I'm probably going to end up going back and reading the full thing, this might, I mean, depending on how good A Dance in Fire is, I might start with this one. Because I kind of wanted to do a longer, you know, series as the first post. I was thinking of doing Dance in Fire, or I was thinking about doing the real Baron Zaya first. But Dance in Fire might be better. We'll see. Alright, so yeah, let's just start with chapter, since I've already read chapter 1. And I've also read chapter 6. So let's just go with these. Ooh, my block skill got increased by reading it. Alright. A Dance in Fire, Chapter 2, by Wogan Jarth. It was a complete loss. The Cathay Rot had stolen or destroyed almost every item of value in the caravan in just a few minutes' time. Decimus Scotty's wagonload of wood he had hoped to trade with the Bosmer had been set on fire and then toppled off the bluff. His clothing and contracts were tattered and the ground into the mud of dirt and mixed with spilt wine. All the pilgrims, merchants, and adventurers in the group moaned and wept as they gathered the remnants of their belongings by the rising sun of the dawn. I best not tell anyone that I managed to hold on to my notes for my translation of the Norriad Playbar, whispered the poet, Griff Milan. They'd probably turn on me. Scotty politely declined the opportunity of telling Milan just how little value he himself placed on the man's property. Instead, he counted the coins in his purse. 34 gold pieces. Very little indeed for an entrepreneur beginning a new business. Hoy! Came a cry from the wood. A small party of Bosmer emerged from the thicket, clad in leather mail and bearing arms, friend or foe. Neither, growled the convoy head. You must be Cyrodiilians, laughed the leader of the group, a tall, skeleton-thin youth with a sharp, vulpine face. We heard you were en route. Evidently, so did our enemies. Ooh, hold on. That was my cat. Alright, where was I? Evidently, so did our enemies. I thought the war was over, muttered one of the caravan's now ruined merchants. The Bosmer laughed again. No, active war, just a little border enterprise. You are going on to Falanesti. I'm not. The convoy head shook his head. As far as I'm concerned, my duty's done. No more horses, no more caravan. Just a fat profit loss to me. The men and women crowded around the man, protesting, threatening, begging. But he refused to step in Valenwood if these were the new times of peace. He said he'd rather come back for the next war. Scotty tried a different route and approached the Bosmer. He spoke with an authoritative but friendly voice, kind he used in negotiations with peevish carpenters. I don't suppose you'd consider escorting me to Falnesti. I'm a representative for an important imperial agency, the Atreus Building Commission, here to help repair and alleviate some of the problems the war with the Khajiit brought to your province. Patriotism, 20 gold pieces, and you must carry your own gear if you have any left, replied the Bosmer. Scotty reflected that negotiations with peevish carpenters rarely went his way either. 6 eager people had enough gold on them for payment. Among those without funds was the poet who appealed to Scotty for assistance. I'm sorry, Griff, I only have 14 gold left over. Not even enough for a decent room when I get to Falnesti. I really would help you if I could, said Scotty, persuading himself that it was true. The band of 6 and their Bosmer escorts began the descent down a rocky path along the bluff. Within an hour's time, they were deep in the jungles of Valenwood. Never-ending canopy of hues of browns and greens obscured the sky. A millennia's worth of fallen leaves formed a deep, wormy sea of putrefaction beneath their feet. Several miles were crossed, wading through the slime. For several more, they took a labyrinthian path across fallen branches and the low-hanging boughs of giant trees. All the while, hour after hour, the inexhaustible Bosmer host, so fast the Cyrodiils struggled to keep from being left behind. A red-faced little merchant with short legs took a bad step on a rotten branch and nearly fell. His fellow provincials had to help him up. The Bosmer paused only a moment, their eyes continually darting to the shadows and the trees above, before moving on at their usual expeditious pace. What are they so nervous about? Wheezed the merchant irritably. More Cathay rot? Don't be ridiculous, laughed the Bosmer unconvincingly. Khajiit this far into Valenwood? In times of peace? They'd never dare. When the group passed high enough above the swamp that the smell was somewhat dissipated, Scotty felt a sudden pang of hunger. He was used to 4 meals a day in the Cyrodiil custom. Hours of non-stop exertion without food was not part of his regimen as a comfortably paid clerk. He pondered, feeling somewhat delirious, how long they had been trotting through the jungle. 12 hours? 20? A week? Time was meaningless. Sunlight was only sporadic through the vegetative ceiling. Phosphorescent molds on the tree and in the muck below provided the only regular illumination. Is it at all possible for us to rest and eat? He hollered to his host up ahead. We're near Falnesti, came the echoing reply. Lots of food there. The path continued upward for several hours across a clot of fallen logs, rising up to the first and then the second boss of the tree line. As they rounded a long corner, the travelers found themselves midway up a waterfall that fell nearly 100 feet or more. No one had the energy to complain as they began pulling up the stacks of rock, agonizing foot by foot. The Bosmer escorts disappeared into the mist, but Scotty kept climbing until there was no more rock left. He wiped the sweat and river water from his eyes. Falnesti spread across the horizon before him. Sprawling across both banks of the river stood the mighty Grat Oak City, with groves and orchards of lesser trees crowding it like supplicants before their king. At a lesser scale, the tree that formed the moving city would have been extraordinarily gnarled and twisted, with a gorgeous crown of gold and green, dripping with vines and shining with sap. At 1.5 miles tall, as wide as it was the most magnificent thing Scotty had ever seen. If he had not been a starving man with the soul of a clerk, he would have sung. There you are, said the leader of the escorts. Not too far for a walk. You should be glad it's wintertide and summertide. The city's on the far south end of the province. Man. Scotty was lost as to how to proceed. The sight of a vertical metropolis where people moved about like ants disoriented all his sensibilities. You wouldn't know of an inn called... He paused for a moment, then pulled Juris' letter from his pocket. Something like Mother Pasco's Tavern? Mother Pasco's? The lead Bosmer laughed, his familiar contemptuous laugh. You won't want to stay there. Visitors always prefer the Alicia Hall and the top offs. It's expensive, but very nice. I'm meeting someone at Mother Pascott's Tavern. If you're made up your mind, go. Take a lift to Havel Slump and ask for directions there. Just don't get lost and fall asleep in the Western Cross. This apparently struck the youth's friends a very witty jest, and so it was with their laughter echoing behind him that Scotty crossed the writhing root system to the base of Falnesty. The ground was littered with leaves and refuse, and from the moment to moment a glass or a bone would plummet from far above. So he walked with his neck crooked to have warning. An intricate network of platforms anchored to the thick vine slipped up and down the slick trunk of the city. With the perfect grace manned by operators with arms as thick as an ox's belly, Scotty approaches the nearest fellow at one of the platforms, who is idly smoking from a glass pipe. I was wondering if you might take me to Havel Slump. The Mur nodded, and within a few minutes' time, Scotty was 200 feet in the air, at a crook between two mighty branches. Curled webs of moss stretched unevenly across the fork, forming a sharing roof for several dozen small buildings. There were only a few souls in the alley, but around the bend ahead, he could hear the sound of music and people. Scotty tipped the Falnesty platform ferryman a gold piece and asked for the location of Mother Pasco's Tavern. Straight ahead of you, sir. But you won't find anyone there, the ferryman explained, pointing in the direction of the noise. Warned us, everyone in Havel Slump has revelry. Scotty walked carefully along the narrow street, though the ground felt as solid as marble avenues of the Imperial City. There were slick cracks in the bark that exposed fatal drops into the river. He took a moment to sit down to rest and get used to the view from the heights. It was beautiful day for certain, but it took Scotty only a few minutes of contemplation to rise up in alarm. A jolly little raft, anchored downstream below him, had distinctly moved several inches while he watched it, but it hadn't moved at all. He had. Together with everything around him. It was no metaphor. The city of Falnesty walked, and considering its size, it moved quickly. Scotty rose to his feet and into a cloud of smoke that drifted out from the bend. It was the most delicious roast he had ever smelled. The clerk forgot his fear and ran. The revelry, as the ferryman had termed, it took place on an enormous platform tied to the tree, wide enough to be a plaza in any other city. A fantastic assortment of the most amazing people Scotty had ever seen were jammed shoulder to shoulder together, many eating and many more drinking, and some dancing to a lutist and a singer perched on an offshoot above the crowd. They were largely Bosmer, true natives clad in colorful leather and bones, with a close minority of orcs whirling through the throng, dancing and bellowing at one another, were a hideous ape people. A few heads bobbing over the tops of the crowds belonged not, as Scotty first assumed, to very tall people, but to a family of centaurs. Care for some mutton? Queried a wizened old Mur who roasted an enormous beast on some red-hot rocks. Scotty quickly paid him a gold piece and devoured the leg he was given, and then another gold piece and another leg. The fellow chuckled when Scotty began choking on a piece of gristle and handed him a mug of a frothing white drink. He drank it and felt a quiver run through his body as if he were being tickled. "What is that?" Scotty asked. "Jaga, fermented pig's milk. I can let you have a flagon of it, and a bit more mutton for another gold." Scotty agreed, paid, and gobbled down the meat and took the flagon with him as he slipped into the crowd. His coworker, Leodes Juris, the man who had told him to come to Valenwood, was nowhere to be seen. When the flagon was a quarter empty, Scotty stopped looking for Juris. When it was half empty, he was dancing with the group, oblivious to the broken planks and gaps in the fencework. At 3/4 empty, he was trading jokes with a group of creatures whose language was completely alien to him. By the time the flagon was completely drained, he was asleep, snoring while the revelry continued all around his supine body. The next morning, still asleep, Scotty had the sensation of someone kissing him. He made a face to return the favor, but a pain like fire spread through his chest and forced him to open his eyes. There was an insect the size of a large calf sitting on him, crushing him, its spiky legs holding him down while a central spiral-bladed vortex of a mouth tore through his shirt. He screamed and thrashed. The beast was too strong. It had found its meal and it was going to finish it. It's over, thought Scotty wildly. I should never have left home. I could have stayed in the city and perhaps found work with Lord Vanek. I could have begun again as a junior clerk and worked my way back up. Suddenly, the mouth released itself. The creature shivered once, expelled a burst of yellow bile, and died. Got one, cried a voice, not too distantly. For a moment, Scotty lay still. His head throbbed and his chest burned. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw movement. Another one of the horrible monsters was scurried towards him. He scrambled, trying to push himself free, but before he could come out, there was sound of a bow cracking, and an arrow pierced the second insect. Good shot, cried another voice. Get the first one again, I just saw it move a little. This time, Scotty felt the impact of the bolt hit the carcass. He cried out. He could hear how muffled his voice was by the beetle's body. Cautiously, he tried sliding a foot out and rolling under. But the movement apparently had the effect of convincing the archers that the creature still lived. A volley of arrows was launched forth. Now the beast was sufficiently perforated so pools of his blood, and likely the blood of its victims, began to seep out onto Scotty's body. When Scotty was a lad, before he grew too sophisticated for such sports, he had often gone to the Imperial arena for the competitions of war. He recalled a great veteran of the fights, when asked, telling him the secret. Whenever I'm in doubt of what to do, and I have a shield, I stay behind it. Scotty followed that advice. After an hour, when he no longer heard the arrows being fired, he threw aside the remains of the bug and leapt as quickly as he could to stand. It was not a moment too soon. A gang of 8 archers had their bows pointing in his direction, ready to fire. When they saw him, they laughed. Didn't anyone ever tell you not to sleep in the Western Cross? How are we going to exterminate all the horrors if you drunks keep feeding them? Scotty shook his head and walked back along the platform round the bend to Havel's slump. He was bloodied and torn and tired and had far too much fermented pig's milk. All he wanted was a proper place to lie down. He stepped into Mother Pascot's tavern, a dank place, wet with sap, smelling of mildew. My name is Decmus Scotty, he said. I was hoping you have someone named Juris staying here. Decmus Scotty, pondered the fleshy proprietress, Mother Pascot herself. I've heard that name. Oh, you must be that fellow he left a note for. Let me go see if I can find it. That's a nice book. It really paints Valenwood to be a real magical place, honestly. But I think if they ever do make a game set in Valenwood, they're gonna have a hard time with it. You know, they're setting the expectations that players are having for Valenwood very high, with like a moving city and all that detail. It sounds awesome, honestly. It sounds like a really cool country. Man, am I getting worse at, like, reading somehow? I feel like my throat is getting sore way sooner. Whew. All right. Yeah, I don't know. I think I can maybe read 1 or 2 more chapters of Dance and Fire, but I was thinking I could probably. I thought I could probably finish it, but at this rate, I don't know about that. Cause man, I don't know. I wonder if there's like any techniques that like voiceover artists, I guess, I don't know what to call them, use to, make sure the throat doesn't get sore while they're doing it. Just reading for so long out loud. I don't know. Maybe I could look that up. Some methods that people use for like audiobooks or something to make their reading and stuff better. Alright, let's take another sip and then continue. Also, mark off the previous chapter. Alright. A Dance in Fire, Chapter 3, by Wagon Jarth. Mother Pascot disappeared into the sordid hole that was her tavern and emerged a moment later with a scrap of paper with Laiotis Juris' familiar scrawl. Decimus Scotti held it up before a patch of sunlight that had found its way through the massive boughs of the Tree City and read, Scotti, so you made it to Falanesti, Valenwood. Congratulations. I'm sure you had quite the adventure getting here. Unfortunately, I'm not here anymore, as you probably guess. There's a town downriver called Athi-Im. Get a boat and join me. It's ideal. I hope you brought a lot of contracts, because these people need a lot of building done. They were close to the war, you see, but not so close they don't have any money left to pay. Haha. Meet me down here as soon as you can. Juris. So, Scotti pondered, Juris had left Falnesti and gone to some place called Athi. Given his poor penmanship and ghastly spelling, it could equally well be Athi, Affi, Athri, Imfri, Urtha, or Krakamaka. The sensible thing to do, Scotti knew, was to call this adventure over and try to find some way to get back home to the Imperial City. He was no mercenary devoted to the life of thrills. He was, or at least had been, a senior clerk at a successful private building commission. Over the last few weeks, he had been robbed by the Cathay Rot, taken on a death march through the jungle by a gang of giggling Bosmeri, half starved to death, drugged with fermented pig's milk, nearly slain by some kind of giant tick, and attacked by archers. He was filthy, exhausted, and had, he counted, 10 gold pieces to his name. Now, the man whose proposal brought him to the depths of this misery was not even there. It was both judicious and seemingly to abandon the enterprise entirely. And yet, a small but distinctive voice in his head told him, You have been chosen. You have no other choice but to see this through. Scotti turned to the stout old woman, Mother Pascot, who had been watching him curiously. I was wondering if you knew of a village that was at the edge of the recent conflict with the elsewhere. It's called something like Athi? You must mean Athay, she grinned. My middle lad, Viglil, he manages a dairy down there. Beautiful country, right on the river. Is that where your friend went? Yes, said Scotti. Do you know the fastest way to get there? After a short conversation, an even shorter ride to Falnesti's roots by the way of the platforms, and a jog to the riverbank, Scotty was negotiating transport with a huge fared Bosmer with a face like a pickled carp. He called himself Captain Balfix, but even Scotty, with his sheltered life, could recognize him for what he was, a retired pirate for hire, a smuggler for certain, and probably much worse. His ship, which had clearly been stolen in the distant past, was a bent old imperial sloop. 50 gold, and we'll be in Athe in 2 days' time, boomed Captain Balfix expansively. I have 10, no, sorry, 9 gold pieces, replied Scotty, and feeling the need for explanation. He added, I had 10, but I gave one to the platform ferryman to get me down here. 9 is just as fine, said the captain agreeably. Truth be told, I was going to Athe whether he paid me or not. Make yourself comfortable on the boat. We'll be leaving in just a few minutes. Decimus Scotty boarded the vessel, which sat low in the water of the river, stacked high with crates and sacks that spilled off the hold and galley onto the deck. Each was marked with stamps advertising the most innocuous substances: copper, scraps, lard, ink, high rock meal, marked for cattle, tar, fish, jelly. Scotty's imagination reeled, picturing what sorts of illicit imports were truly aboard. It took more than those few minutes for Captain Balfix to haul in the rest of his cargo, but in an hour the anchor was up, and they were sailing downriver towards Athe. The green-gray water barely rippled and only touched by the fingers of the breeze. Lush plant life crowded the banks, obscuring from sight all the animals that sang and roared at one another. Lulled by the serene surroundings, Scotty drifted to sleep. At night he awoke and gratefully accepted some clean clothes and food from Captain Balfix. Why are you going to Athe, if I may ask? Queried the Bosmer. I'm meeting a former colleague there. He asked me to come down from the Imperial City where I worked for the Atreus Building Commission to negotiate some contracts. Scotty took another bite of the dried sausage they were sharing for dinner. We're going to try to repair and refurbish whatever bridges, roads, and other infrastructures that got damaged in the recent war with the Khajiit. It's been a hard 2 years, the captain nodded his head. Though, I suppose good for me and the likes of you and your friend. Trade routes cut off. Now they think there's going to be a war with the Somerset Isles. You heard that? Scotty shook his head. I've done my fair share of smuggling. Skooma down the coast, even helping some revolutionary types escape the Maine's wrath. But now the wars made me a legitimate trader, a businessman. The first casualty of war is always the corrupted. Scotty said he was sorry to hear that, and they lapsed into silence, watching the stars and moons, reflection on the still water. The next day, Scotty awoke to find the captain wrapped up in his sail, torpid from alcohol, singing in a low, slurred voice. When he saw Scotty rise, he offered his flagon of Jaga. I learned my lesson during revelry at Western Cross. The captain laughed and then burst into tears. I don't want to be legitimate. Other pirates I used to know are still raping and stealing and smuggling and selling nice folks like you into slavery. I swear to you, I never thought the first time that I ran a real shipment of legal goods that my life would turn out like this. Oh, I know I could go back to it, but Bandar knows not after all I've seen. I'm a ruined man. Scotty helped the weeping Mur out of the sail, murmuring words of reassurance, then added, Forgive me for changing the subject, but where are we? Oh, moaned Captain Balfix miserably, we made good time. Athe's right around the bend in the river. Then it looks like Athe's on fire, said Scotty, pointing. A great plume of black as pitch... A great plume of smoke, black as pitch, was rising above the trees as they drifted around the bend. The next they saw the flames, and then the blackened skeletal remains of the village. Dying, blazing villagers leapt from the rocks into the river. A cacophony of wailing met their ears, and they could see roaming along the edges of the town were the figures of Khajiit soldiers bearing torches. Bandar, bless me, the war's back on, slurred the captain. Oh no, whimpered Scotty. The sloop drifted with the current toward the opposite shore away from the fiery town. Scotty turned his attention there, and the sanctuary it offered, just a peaceful arbor away from the horror. There was a shudder of leaves in 2 of the trees, and a dozen lithe Khajiit drop to the ground armed with bows. "They see us," hissed Scotty. "They've got bows." "Well, of course they have bows," snarled Captain Balfix. "We Bosmer may have invented the bloody things, but we didn't think to keep 'em secret. You bloody bureaucrat. Now they're setting their arrows on fire." "Yes, they do that sometimes. Captain, they're shooting at us. They're shooting at us with flaming arrows." "Ah, so they are," the captain agreed. "The aim here is to avoid being hit." But hit they were, and very shortly thereafter, even worse, the second volley of arrows hit the supply of pitch, which ignited in a tremendous blue blaze. Scotty grabbed Captain Balfix and they leapt overboard just before the ship and all its cargo disintegrated. The shock of the cold water brought the Bosmer into temporary sobriety. He called to Scotty, who was already swimming as fast as he could toward the bend. "Master Decamus, where do you think you're swimming to?" "Back to Fall Nesty," cried Scotty. "It will take you days, and by the time you get there, everyone will know about the attack on Athe. They'll never let anyone they don't know in. The closest village downriver is Grenos. Maybe they'll give us shelter." Scotty swam back to the captain, and side by side they began paddling in the middle of the river, past the burning residence of the village. He thanked Mara he had learned to swim. Many Cyrodiil did not, as largely landlocked as the imperial province was. Had he been raised in Mer-Karup or Artemon, he might have been doomed, but the imperial city itself was encircled by water, and every lad and lass there knew how to cross without a boat, even those who grew up to be clerks and not adventurers. Captain Balfix's sobriety faded as he grew used to the water's temperature. Even in wintertide, the Zilo River was fairly temperate and after a fashion even more comfortable. The Bosmer strokes were uneven, and he'd stray closer to Scotty and then further away, pushing ahead and then falling behind. Scotty looked to the shore to his right. The flames had caught the trees like tinder. Behind them was an inferno with which they were barely keeping pace. To the shore on their left, all looked fair until he saw a tremble in the river reeds, and then what caused it. A pride of the largest cats he'd ever seen. They were auburn-haired, green-eyed beasts with jaws and teeth to match as wild as nightmares. And they were watching the two swimmers, keeping pace. "Captain Balfax, we can't go to either that shore or the other one, or we'll be parboiled or eaten," Scotty whispered. "Try to even your kicking and your strokes. Breathe like you would normally if you're feeling tired. Tell me, and we'll float on our backs for a while." Anyone who has had the experience of giving rational advice to a drunkard would understand the hopelessness. Scotty kept pace with the captain, slowing himself, quickening, drifting left and right, while the Bosmer moaned old ditties from his pirate days. When he wasn't watching his companion, he watched the cats on the shore. After a stretch, he turned to his right. Another village had caught fire. Undoubtedly, it was Grenos. Scotty stared at the blazing fury, awed by the sight of the destruction, and did not hear that the captain had ceased to sing. When he turned back, Captain Balfix was gone. Scotty dove into the murky depths of the river over and over again. There was nothing to be done. When he surfaced after his final search, he saw that the giant cats had moved on, perhaps assuming that he too had drowned. He continued his lonely swim downriver. A tributary, he noted, had formed a final barrier, keeping the flames from spreading further. But there were no more towns. After several hours, he began to ponder the wisdom of going ashore. Which shore was the safest? Was the question. He was spared the decision. Ahead of him was a rocky island with a bonfire. He did not know if he were intruding on a party of Bosmeri or Khajiit, only that he could swim no more. With straining, aching muscles, he pulled himself onto the rocks. They were Bosmer refugees, he gathered, even before they told him. Roasting over the fire was the remains of one of the giant cats that had been stalking him through the jungle on the opposite shore. "Sench tiger," said one of the young warriors ravenously. "It's no animal. It's smart as any Cathay rat or Ohms or any other bleeding Khajiit. Pity this one drowned. I would have gladly killed it. You'll like the meat, though. Sweet from all the sugar these asses eat. Scotty did not know if this creature... did not know if he was capable of eating a creature as intelligent as a man or mer. But he surprised himself, as he had done several times over the last few days. It was rich, succulent, and sweet, like sugared pork, but no seasonings had been added. He surveyed the crowd as he ate. A sad lot, some still weeping for the lost family members. They were the survivors of both villages of Grenos and Athe, and war was on every person's lips. Why had the Khajiit attacked again? Why specifically directed at Scotty as a Cyrodiil? Why was the Emperor not enforcing peace in his provinces? I was to meet another Cyrodiil, he said to a Bosmer maiden who he understood to be from Athe. His name was Lyotis Juris. I don't suppose you know what might have happened to him. I don't know your friend, but there were many Cyrodiils in Athe when the fire came, said the girl. Some of them, I think, left quickly. They were going to Vindisi Island, inland in the jungle. So are many of us. If you wish, you may come as well. Decimus Scotty nodded solemnly. He made himself as comfortable as he could in the stony ground of the river, and somehow, after much effort, he fell asleep. But he did not sleep well. Alright. This is a very nice story. I'm liking it so far. Very descriptive with his surroundings, and I don't know, it's, painting a real nice picture of Valenwood. And, yeah, I'm liking it. Loving it so far. I think, already read 6, so I just read 3. So, read 4, 5, and I can't read 3 more today. But I could read 1 more today. I think I have that in me. Let's go ahead and read A Dance of Fire Chapter 4. Probably. But, whew, man, take a little bit, drink a little bit more water. Alright.
Keep moving.
Alright, Ordinator, I'm just reading. Let me read in peace. Come on. Alright. A Dance in Fire, Chapter 4, by Wagan Jarth. 18 Bosmeri and 1 Cyrodiilic former senior clerk for an Imperial Building Commission trudged through the jungle westward from the Xylo River to the ancient village of Vindisi. For Decimus Scotty, the jungle was hostile, unfamiliar ground. The enormous vermiculated trees filled the bright morning with darkness, and resembled nothing so much as grasping claws bent on impeding their progress. Even the fronds of the low plants quivered with malevolent energy. What was worse, he was not alone in his anxiety. His fellow travelers, the natives who had survived the Khajiit attacks on the villages of Grenos and Athe, wore faces of undisguised fear. There was something sentient in the jungle, and not merely the mad but benevolent indigenous spirits. In his peripheral vision, Scotty could see the shadows of Khajiit following the refugees, leaping from tree to tree. When he turned to face them, the live forms vanished into the gloom, as if they'd never been there. But he knew he had seen them, and the Bosmeri saw them too, and they quickened their pace. Oh. No. After 18 hours, bitten raw by insects, scratched 1,000 thorns, they emerged into a valley clearing. It was night, but a row of blazing torches greeted them, illuminating the leather-wrought tents and jumbled stones of the hamlet of Vindisi. At the end of the valley, the torches marked a sacred site, a gnarled bower of trees pressed closely together to form a temple. Wordlessly, the Bosmeri walked the torch arcade toward the trees. Scotty followed them. When they reached the solid mass of living wood, With only one gaping portal, Scotty could see a dim blue light glowing within. A low, sonorous moan from 100 voices echoed within. The Bosmeri maiden he had been following held out her hand, stopping him. "You do not understand, but no outsider, not even a friend, may enter. This is a holy place." Scotty nodded and watched the refugees march into the temple, heads bowed, their voices joined with the ones within. When the last wood elf had gone inside, Scotty turned his attention back to the village. There must be food to be had somewhere. A tendril of smoke and a faint whiff of roasting venison beyond the torchlight led him. They were 5 Cyrodiils, 2 Bretons and a Nord. The group gathered a campfire of glowing white stones, pulling steaming strips of meat from the cadaver of a great stag. At Scotty's approach, they rose up, all but the Nord, who was distracted by his hunk of animal flesh. "Good evening. Sorry to interrupt, but I was wondering if I might have a little something to eat. I'm afraid I'm rather hungry, after walking all day with some refugees from Grenos and Athe." They bade him to sit down and eat, and introduce themselves. "So the war's back on," said Scotty amiably. "Best things for these effort do-nothings," replied the Nord in between bites. "I've never seen such a lazy culture. Now they've got the Khajiit striking them on land and the High Elves at sea. If there's any province that deserves a little distress, it's damnable Valenwood." "I don't see how they're so offensive to you," laughed one of the Bretons. "They're congenial thieves, even worse than the Khajiit, because they're so blessed meek in their aggression." The Nord spat out a gob of fat which sizzled on the hot stones of the fire. "They spread their forests into a territory that doesn't belong to them, slowly infiltrating their neighbors, and they're puzzled when elsewhere shoves back at them. They're all villains of the worst order." "What are you doing here?" asked Scotty. "I'm a diplomat from the court of Gehenna," muttered the Nord, returning to his food. "What about you? What are you doing here?" asked one of the Cyrodiils. "I work for Lord Atreus' building commission in the Imperial City," said Scotty. "One of my former colleagues suggested that I come down to Valenwood. He said the war was over. I could contract a great deal of business for my firm, rebuilding what was lost. One disaster after another, and I've lost all my money. I'm in the middle of rekindling war, and I cannot find my former colleague." "Your former colleague?" murmured another of the Cyrils, who had introduced himself as Reglius. "He wasn't by any chance named Lyodus Juris, was he? You know him? He lured me to Valenwood in nearly the exact same circumstances," smiled Reglius grimly. "I worked for your employer's competitor, Lord Vanixman, where Lyodus Juris also formerly worked. He wrote to me asking that I represent an Imperial building commission and contract some post-war construction. I'd just been released from my employment, and I thought that if I brought some new business, I could have my job back. Juris and I met in Athe, and he said he was going to arrange a very lucrative meeting with the Sylvanar." Scotty was stunned. "Where is he now?" "I'm no theologian, so I couldn't say," Regulus shrugged. "He's dead. When the Khajiit attacked Athe, they began torching the harbor where Juris was readying his boat, or, I should say, my boat, since it was purchased with the gold I brought. By the time we were even aware of what was happening, enough to flee, everything by the water was ash. The Khajiit may be animals, but they know how to range an attack." "I think they followed us through the jungle to Vindisi," said Scotty, nervously. "There was definitely a group of something jumping along the treetops." "Probably one of the monkey folk," snorted the Nord. "Nothing to be concerned about." When we first came to Vindisi and the Bosmeri all entered the tree, they were furious, whispering something about unleashing an ancient terror on their enemies. The Breton shivered, remembering. They've been there ever since for over a day and a half now. If you want someone to be afraid of, that's the direction to look. The other Breton, who was a representative of the Daggerfall Mages Guild, was staring off into the darkness while his fellow provincial spoke. "Maybe there's something in the jungle, too, right on the edge of the village looking in." "More refugees, maybe?" asked Scotty, trying to keep the alarm out of his voice. "Not unless they're traveling through the trees now," whispered the wizard. The Nord and one of the Cyrodiils grabbed a long tarp of wet leather and pulled it across the fire, instantly extinguishing it without so much as a sizzle. Now, Scotty could see the intruders. Their elliptical yellow eyes and long, cruel blades catching the torchlight. He froze with fear, praying that he too was not so visible to them. He felt something bump against his back and gasped. Regulus's voice hissed from up above. "Be quiet for Mara's sake and climb up here." Scotty grabbed hold of the knotted double vine that hung down from a tall tree at the edge of the dead campfire. He scrambled up as quickly as he could, holding his breath lest any grunt of exertion escape him. At the top of the vine, high above the village, was an abandoned nest from some great bird and a trident-shaped branch. As soon as Scotty had pulled himself into the soft, fragrant straw, Regulus pulled up the vine. No one else was there, and when Scotty looked down, he could see no one below. No one, that is, except the Khajiit slowly moving toward the glow of the temple tree. "Thank you," whispered Scotty, deeply touched that a competitor had helped him. He turned away from the village and saw that the tree's upper branches brushed against the mossy rocky walls that surrounded the valley below. "How are you at climbing?" "You're mad," said Regulus under his breath. "We should stay here until they leave. If they burn Vindisi like they did Arthe and Grenos, we'll be dead." Sure as if we were on the ground, Scotty began the slow, careful climb up the tree, testing each branch. "Can you see what they're doing?" "I can't really tell." Regulus stared down into the gloom. "They're at the front of the temple. I think they also have, it looks like long ropes trailing off behind them into the pass." Scotty crawled into one of the strongest branches, pointed toward the wet, rocky face of the cliff. It was not a far jump at all. So close, in fact, that I could smell the moisture and feel the coolness of the stone. But it was a jump nevertheless, and in his history as a clerk, he had never before leapt from a tree 100 feet off the ground to sheer rock. He pictured in his mind's eye the shadow that had pursued him through the jungle from the heights above, how their legs coiled to spring, how their arms snapped forward in an elegant, fluid motion to grasp. He leapt. His hands grappled for rock. The long, thick cords of moss were more accessible. He held hard, but when he tried to plant his feet forward, they slipped up skyward. For a few seconds, he found himself upside down, before he managed to pull himself into a more conventional position. There was a narrow outcropping jutting out of the cliff where he could stand and finally exhale. "Regulus! Regulus! Regulus!" Scotty did not dare to call out in a minute. There was a shaking of branches, and Lord Vanish's man emerged. First his satchel, then his head, and then the rest of him. Scotty started to whisper something, but Regulus shook his head violently and pointed downward. One of the Khajiit was at the base of the tree, peering at the remains of the campfire. Regulus awkwardly tried to balance himself on the branch, but as strong as it was exceedingly difficult with only one free hand. Scotty cupped his palms and then pointed at the satchel. It seemed to pain Regulus to let it out of his grasp, but he relented and tossed it to Scotty. There was a small, almost invisible hole in the back. When Scotty caught it, a single gold coin dropped out. It rang as it bounced against the rock wall. On the descent, a high, soft sound that seemed like the loudest alarm Scotty had ever heard. Then, many things happened very quickly. The Cathay Rot at the base of the tree looked up and gave a loud wail. The other Khajiit followed in chorus as the cat below crouched down and then sprung up into the lower branches. Regulus saw it below him, climbing up with impossible dexterity, and panicked. Even before he jumped, Scotty could tell that he was going to fall. With a cry, Regulus the clerk plunged to the ground, breaking his neck on impact. A flash of white fire erupted from every crevice of the temple, and the moan of the Bosmer prayer changed into something terrible and otherworldly. The climbing Cathay Rot stopped and stared. "Kerugo," it gasped. "The wild hunt." It was as if a crack in reality had opened wide. A flood of horrific beasts, tentacled toads, insects of armor and spine, gelatinous serpents, and vaporous beings with the face of gods all poured forth from the great hollow tree. Blind with fury, they tore the Khajiit in front of the temple to pieces. All the other cats fled for the jungle. But as they did so, they began pulling on the ropes they carried. In a few seconds' time, the entire village of Vindisi was boiling with the lunatic apparitions of the wild hunt. Over the babbling, barking, and howling horde, Scotty heard the Cyrodiils in hiding cry out as they were devoured. The Nord too was found and eaten. In both Bretons, the wizard had turned himself invisible, but the swarm did not rely on sight. The tree the Cathay-Rat was in began to sway and rock from the impossible violence beneath it. Scotty looked at the Khajiit's fear-struck eyes and held out one of the cords of moss. The cat's face showed its pitiful gratitude as it leapt for the vine. It didn't have time to entirely replace that expression when Scotty pulled back the cord and watched it fall. The hunt consumed it to the bone before it struck the ground. Scotty's own jump up to the next outcropping of rock was immeasurably more successful. From there, he pulled himself to the top of the cliff and was able to look down into the chaos that had been the village of Vindisi. The hunt's mass had grown and began to spill out through the pass of the valley, pursuing the fleeing Khajiit. It was then that the madness truly began. In the moon's light from Scotty's vantage, he could see where the Khajiit had attached their ropes. With a thunderous boom, an avalanche of boulders poured over the pass. When the dust cleared, he saw that the valley had been sealed. The wild hunt had nowhere to turn but on in itself. Scotty turned his head, unable to bear to look at the cannibalistic orgy that the night jungle stood before him, a web of wood. He slung Regulus's satchel over his shoulder and entered. Whoa. That was really good. I just want to read another one right away. I want to know what happens next. Alright, Dance and Fire, chapter... Actually, let me drink some water first. Alright. A Dance and Fire, chapter 5, by Wagon Jarth. Soap, the Force will eat love, straight ahead, stupid and a stupid cow. The voice boomed out so suddenly that Decimus Scotty jumped. He stared off into the dim jungle glade from which he only heard animal and insect calls, and the low whistling of wind moments before. It was a queer, oddly accented voice of indiscriminate gender, tremulous in its modulations, but unmistakably human. Or, at the very least, elven. An isolated Bosmer, perhaps, with a poor grasp of the Cyrodiilic language. After countless hours of plodding through the dense knot of Valenwood jungle, any voice of slight familiarity sounded wondrous. "Hello," he cried. "Beetles on any names? Certainly, yesterday, yes." The voice called back, "Who, what, and when, and mice?" "I'm afraid I don't understand," replied Scotty, turning toward the brambled tree, thick as a wagon, where the voice had issued. "But you needn't be afraid of me. My name is Decimus Scotty. I'm a Cyrodiil from the Imperial City. I came here to help rebuild Valenwood after the war, you see, and now I'm rather lost." "Gemstones and grilled slaves, the war!" moaned the voice and broke down into sobs. "You know about the war? I wasn't even sure how far away from the border I am now." Scotty began slowly walking toward the tree. He dropped Regulus's satchel to the ground and held out his empty hands. "I'm unarmed. I only want to know the way to the closest town. I'm trying to meet my friend Laodice Juris in Sylvanar." "Sylvanar?" The voice laughed. It laughed even louder as Scotty circled the tree. "Worms and wine. Worms and wine. Sylvanar sings for worms and wine." "There's nothing to be found anywhere around the tree. I don't see you. Why are you hiding?" In frustration, born out of hunger and exhaustion, he struck the tree trunk. A sudden shiver of gold and red erupted from the hollow nook above, and Scotty was surrounded by 6 winged creatures, scarcely more than a few inches long, bright crimson eyes were set on either side of a tunnel-like protuberance. The animals, always open mouths, they were legless, and their thin, rapidly beating, aureated wings seemed poorly constructed to transport their fat, swollen bellies. And yet they darted through the air like sparks from a fire, whirling about the poor clerk. They began chattering, what he now understood to be perfect nonsense. Wines and worms, how far from the border am I? Academic garnishments, and alas, Laotis juris. Hello, I'm afraid I'm unarmed. Smoke and flames in the closest town is dear oblivion. Swollen on bad meat, an indigo nimbus, but you needn't be afraid of me. Why are you hiding? Why are you hiding? Before I begin to friend, love me, Lady Zuleika. Furious with the mimics, Scotty swung his arms, driving them up into the tree tops. He stomped back to the clearing and opened his satchel again, as he had done some hours before. There was still, unsurprisingly, nothing useful in the bag, and nothing to eat in any corner or pocket. A goodly amount of gold, he smiled grimly, as he had done before, at the irony of being financially solvent in the jungle. A stack of neat blank contracts from Lord Vanek's building commission, some thin cord, and an oiled leather cloak for bad weather. At least, Scotty considered he had not suffered rain. A rolling moan of thunder reminded Scotty of what he had suspected for some weeks now. He was cursed. Within an hour's time, he was wearing the cloak and clawing his way through the mud. The trees, which had earlier allowed no sunlight in, provided no shelter against the pounding storm and wind. The only sounds that pierced the pelting of the rain were the mocking calls of the flying creatures flitting just above, babbling their nonsense. Scotty bellowed at them, threw rocks, but they seemed enamored of his company. While he was reaching to grab a promising-looking stone to hurl at his tormentors, Scotty felt something shift beneath his feet. Wet but solid ground suddenly liquefied and became a rolling tide, rushing towards him. Light as a leaf, he flew head over feet overhead until the mud flow dropped and he continued forward. Plunging down into a river 25 feet below, the storm passed quite as instantly as it had arrived. The sun melted, the dark clouds warned Scotty as he swam for the shore. There, another sign of the Khajiit incursion into Valenwood greeted him. A small fishing village had stood there once, so recently extinct that it smoldered like a still warm corpse. Dirt cairns that had once housed fish by the smell of them had been ravaged, their bounty turned to ash. Rafts and skiffs lay broken, scuttled, half submerged. All the villagers were no more, either dead or refugees far away, or so he presumed. Something banged against the wall of one of the ruins. Scotty ran to investigate. "My name is Decimus Scotty," sang the first winged beast. "I'm a Cyrodiil from the Imperial City. I came here to help rebuild Valenwood after the war, you see, and now I'm rather lost." "I swelled to maculate, ape neck," agreed one of its companions. "I don't see you. Why are you hiding?" As they fell into chattering, Scotty began to search the rest of the village. Surely the cats had left something behind. A scrap of dried meat, a morsel of fish, sausage, anything? But they had been immaculate in their complete annihilation. There was nothing to eat anywhere. Scotty did find one item of possible use. Under the tumbled remains of a stone hut, a bow and 2 arrows made of bone. The string had been lost, likely burned away in the heat of the fire, but he pulled a cord from Regulus's satchel and restrung it. The creatures flew over and hovered nearby as he worked. The convent of the sacred Laotis Juris. "You know about the war? Worms and wine, circumscribe a golden host, ape neck." The moment the cord was caught, Scotty knocked an arrow and swung around, pulling the string tight against his chest. The winged beast, having had experience with archers before, shot off in all directions in a blur. They needn't have bothered. Scotty's first arrow drove into the ground 3 feet in front of him. He swore and retrieved it. The mimics, having likewise had experience with poor archers before, returned at once to hovering nearby and mocking Scotty. On his second shot, Scotty did much better. In purely mechanical terms, he remembered how the archers and Falinesi looked when he pulled himself out from under the Horver tick, and they were all taking aim at him. He extended his left hand, and right elbow in a symmetrical line, drawing the bow so his hand touched his jawline, and he could see the creature in his sight like the arrow was a finger he was pointing with. The bolt missed the target by only 2 feet, but it continued its trajectory, snapping when it struck a rock. Scotty walked to the river's edge. He only had 1 arrow left, and perhaps, he considered, be most practical to find a slow-moving fish and fire it on that. If he missed, at least there was less of a chance of breaking the shaft. He could always retrieve it from the water. A rather torpid, whiskered fish rolled by, and he took aim at it. "My name is Decimus Scotty," one of the creatures howled, frightening the fish away. "Stupid, and a stupid cow. Will you dance a dance in fire?" Scotty turned and aimed the arrow as he'd done before. This time, however, he remembered to plant his feet as the archers had done, 7 inches apart, knees straight, left leg slightly forward to meet the angle of his right shoulder. He released the last arrow. The arrow also proved a serviceable prong for roasting the creature against the smoking hot stone of one of the hot ruins. Its other companions had disappeared instantly after the beast was slain, and Scotty was able to dine in peace. The meat proved to be delicious, if scarcely more than a first course. He was picking the last of it from the bones when a boat sailed into view from around the bend of the river. At the helm were Bosmer sailors. Scotty ran to the bank and waved his arms. They averted their eyes and continued past. "You bloody callous bastards," Scotty howled. "Knaves, hooligans, ape-necks, scoundrels." A gray whiskered form came out from a hatch, and Scotty immediately recognized him as Griff Malin, the poet-translator he had met in the caravan from Cyrodiil. He peered in Scotty's direction, and his eyes lit up with delight. "Decimus Scotty, precisely the man I hoped to see. I want to get your thoughts on a rather puzzling passage in the Morrowind play bar. It begins, 'I went weeping into the world, searching for wonders.' Perhaps you're familiar with it?" "I'd like nothing better than to discuss the Morrowind play bar with you, Griff," Scotty called back. "Would you let me come aboard, though, first?" Overjoyed at being on a ship bound for any port at all, Scotty was true to his word. For an hour, as the boat rolled down the river past the blackened remnants of the Bosmeri village, he asked no questions and spoke nothing of his life over the past few weeks. He merely listened to Malon's theories of Rethic Aldmeri Esoterica. The translator was undemanding of his guest's scholarship, accepting nods and shrugs as civilized conversation. He even produced some wine and fish jelly, which he shared with Scotty, absent-mindedly as he expounded on his various theses. Finally, while Malon was searching for a reference to some minor point in his notes, Scotty asked, "Rather off subject, but I was wondering where we are bound." "The very heart of the province, Sylvanar," Malon said, not looking up from the passage he was reading. "It's somewhat bothersome, actually, as I wanted to go to Woodhearth first to talk to a Bosmer there who claims to have an original copy of Durith Yalmnilhiad, if you can believe it. But for the time being, that has to wait. Somerset Isle has surrounded the city and is in the process of starving the citizenry until they surrender. It's a tiresome prospect, since the Bosmeri are happy to eat one another. So there's a risk that at the end, only one fat wood elf will remain to wave the flag." "That is vexing," agreed Scotty sympathetically. "To the east, the Khajiit are burning everything, and to the west, the High Elves are waging war. I don't suppose the borders to the north are clear." "They're even worse," replied Malon, fingering the page, still distracted. "The Cyrodiils and Redgars don't want the Bosmer refugees streaming into their provinces. It only stands to reason. Imagine how much more criminally inclined they'd be now that they're homeless and hungry." "So," murmured Scotty, feeling a little shiver, "we're trapped in Valenwood." "Not at all. I need to leave fairly shortly myself, as my publisher has set a very definite deadline for my new book of translations. From what I understand, one merely petitions to the Silvernar for special border protection, and one can cross into Cyrodiil with impunity. Petition the Silvenar or petition at Silvenar? Petition the Silvenar at Silvenar. It's an odd nomenclature that is typical of this place. The sort of thing that makes my job as a translator that much more challenging. The Silvenar, he or rather they, are the closest the Bosmeri have to a great leader. The essential thing to remember about the Silvenar, Melon smiled, finding a passage he was looking for. Here. A fortnight inexplicable, the world burns into a dance. There's that metaphor again. What were you saying about the Silvenar? Asked Scotty. The essential thing to remember. I don't remember what I was saying, replied Melon, turning back to his oration. In a week's time, the little boat bumped along the shallow, calmer waters of the foaming current the Xylo had become, and Decimus Scotty first saw the city of Silvenar. If Falinesti was a tree, then Silvenar was a flower, a magnificent pile of faded shades of green, red, blue, and white, shining with crystalline residue. Malon had mentioned offhand, when not otherwise explaining Aldmeri prosody, that Silvenar had once been a blossoming glade in a forest, but owing to some spell or natural cause, the tree sap began flowing with translucent liquor. The process of the sap flowing and hardening over the colorful trees had formed the web of the city. Malon's description was intriguing, but it hardly prepared it for the city's beauty. What is the finest, most luxurious tavern here? Scotty asked one of the Bosmer boatmen. Prothala Hall, Malon answered. But why don't you stay with me? I'm visiting an acquaintance of mine, a scholar I think you'll find fascinating. His hovel isn't much, but he has the most extraordinary ideas about the principles of Merethic Aldmeri tribe, the Sarmachi. Under any other circumstance I would happily accept, said Scotty graciously, but after weeks of sleeping on the ground, or on a raft, and eating whatever I could scrounge, I feel the need for some indulgent creature comforts. And then, after a day or two, I'll petition the Silvernar for safe passage to Cyrodiil. The men bade each other goodbye. Griff Malon gave him the address of his publisher in the Imperial City, which Scotty accepted, and then quickly forgot. The clerk wandered the streets of Silvenar, crossing bridges of amber, admiring the petrified forest architecture. In front of a particularly estimable palace of silvery reflective crystal, he found Prothala Hall. He took the finest room and ordered a gluttonous meal of the finest quality. At a nearby table, he saw two very flat fellows, a man and a Bosmer, remarking how much finer the food was there than at the Silvenar's palace. They began to discuss the war and some issues of finance and rebuilding provincial bridges. The man noticed Scotty looking at them, and his eyes flashed in recognition. Scotty, is that you? Kinnereth, where have you been? I've had to make all the contacts here on my own. At the sound of his voice, Scotty recognized him. The fat man was Elias Juris, vastly engorged. Ooh, I'm loving this story. It's pretty nice. So that was chapter... Wait, was that chapter 5 already? What the hell? Yeah, that was 5 already. And I've read 6 before. I don't know if I can... I could skip 6, go to 7 right now, and finish the series, but I don't think I can handle it. My throat can handle it.
Keep moving.
Okay, man. Stop. I'm breathing, man. Don't you get it? No. I think next time I'll just start with 6 and, read 7 after that, and then finish the series. I'll just read 6 again, because I'm really vibing with the story. I'm loving it. It's probably one of my... It is a very good series. Dance and Fire, definitely a good one to read. Yeah. I don't know. This whole series has been so much fun. I've been watching more, like, documentaries Like, I like to put on little, these, I like to put on ocean documentaries in the background and stuff, and, no, I think that has, like, today I was watching Kingdom of Seahorses, which is a Nova documentary. That one's
We're
pretty
watching
interesting.
you, scum.
Quite the interesting one. And yeah, I just have like a bunch of these ocean documentary things. I think I've come up with a new sort of dream, and that is to voice a documentary about octopuses. Wouldn't that be awesome? That would be sick. If I could be the voice of a octopus documentary. I don't know if I quite have the voice for that. The voices for the people in documentaries are godly. I love the voice. Their voices are so nice and calm.
No trouble here.
On the ocean documentaries in specific, I've watched some like non-ocean documentaries, but the voices aren't quite as like calming and soothing in them. Definitely recommend watching some ocean documentaries if you, yeah, you can, yeah, that's the dream. Be the voice for a octopus documentary, I think. And I think this is good practice as well. You know, just reading books out loud on stream. It's some nice practice as well. But
Not now.
anyway,
Head on.
I think that is gonna do it for today. I had a great time. A Dance in Fire. Such a good book. Loved it. Great story. Oh, dude, the way they were describing Valenwood was really good. Very descriptive. Was really like building a picture of the world in my head. I loved that. That was really good. Purely story wise, it's good. It's fine. It's not like the most interesting story, I guess, but just the the way the world is being described in that series is so nice. I mean the story itself is also interesting, just not like if you took away the real nice description of Valenwood, the story wouldn't really, it doesn't stand on its own as much, I think. But yeah, now I really want to see like a game set in Valenwood, even though I know, having it live up to the descriptions in A Dance in Fire is probably a bit too challenging. I don't know if they'll ever be able to make a game quite like that, that really encapsulates the kind of world they've set up with that book. But it'll be interesting to see. Alright, that's gonna do for today. I hope you guys had a good time. And yeah, have a nice night, nice day, whatever time zone you're in. And yeah, peace.